let me tell you all a little bit about our amazing presenter. Presenter is Joe Tellez. He's a native of San Antonio, and he's been a geologist with 44 years of experience. Sorry guys, I didn't print this out, so I'm having to read it on a small screen. Okay. He's known Gary Bettis. Gary, raise your hand. He's too busy eating. Since December of 2011, and has provided geologic expertise to support his studies of the white shaman pictograph. And Gary, remind me to talk to you about the white shaman, something that happened this weekend to me. Since that time, he's helped him in the preparation of presentations regarding various studies to various audiences, okay? His focus has been on verifying the geographical interpretations of his work by conducting research on geologic and hydrogeologic features, which are referenced in those pictographs. And if you haven't seen those pictographs, you're missing out. They are amazing. He performs independent research on local history of San Antonio and South Texas, such as the Spanish colonial period and their early encounters with the indigenous population. He attended San Antonio College for 2 years and then transferred to UTSA, where he earned his bachelor's in geology in 1981. And then he attended Sul Ross University and was awarded a master's in geology. In 2003, he obtained his professional geoscientist license for the state of Texas. We are dearly honored because he's very knowledgeable. For the past 25 years, he's been an environment consultant performing remediation and restoration at a variety of U.S. Air Force installations. He is presently employed as a senior environmental scientist by Cherokee Nation Strategic Programs. There, he provides technical guidance to the U.S. Air Force regarding their plans and reports focused on assessment and cleanup of several closed Air Force bases in Northeast U.S. Please help me welcome Mr. Joe Tellez.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, that was almost as long as my slides are going to be. Let me try this. Oop. There. Okay. Okay. So, you know all about me now. What I will tell you is this is a very diverse presentation. It starts off examining the natural resources that drew people to here, people in the broadest sense, the natives as well as the immigrants that later came from Europe. There. Okay. One of the things that kind of helped me assemble this thought process was the name of this organization, San Antonio Mission Indian Descendants. So we start with the land, the San Antonio, our community. This is how we think of it today. I've marked Blue Hole, the headwaters of the San Antonio River, and San Pedro Springs with the little yellow marker. The, oops, forgot, got my pointer. Let's see, does it work? Can you even see that?
It's too light.
It's too light. Anyway.
It's reflecting, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's all right. I'll point with my finger if I need to. I'm close enough. Anyway, so we can see that these two water features are at the heart of San Antonio. And of course, the San Antonio Springs is the headwater for the San Antonio River, which flows nearby and is, in a sense, kind of the string along which the missions were set up. Okay, San Antonio. Yanaguana is renamed San Antonio de Padua, 1691. Here's an image of St. Anthony. The expedition, a Spanish expedition, encountered natives living here. They referred to the region as Yanaguana. Well, that was the Indian name. The Spanish, in their own culture, tended to name things for feast days. So the 13th of June was the feast day of St. Anthony, and we become San Antonio. Okay? Still haven't got the hang of that. Okay. Here's a nice, pretty depiction by an artist of what Blue Hole might have looked like. Blue Hole was first encountered in 1709 by Fathers Espinosa and Olivares. Here's kind of a synopsis. I think there's some way that this could be made smaller. No, I guess not. Oh, that's weird. Okay. At the bottom there, it says that one of the friars, on observing the flow from the spring and the subsequent river, literally said, wow, this could not just support a village or a town, this could support a city. He was literally foreshadowing the city that we live in. They also encountered San Pedro Springs in the same year. Not quite the way it flows today, but there's a lot of people using the water coming out of it. This image is a scan out of a book, and it shows you how important in the 18th century these waterways were to the settlement of San Antonio. So we see the Presidio, the Cathedral, and San Antonio de Valero, the mission. And in particular, the Spanish saw the value in nestling the town between the two waterways. So they became defensive points. So we're talking about the water and the rock. Well, the water comes from the rock. The springs that I was showing you issue from limestone rock. They flow down. This line over here is San Pedro Creek, and the wavy line is the San Antonio River. And that framed the early settlement of San Antonio. And over 300 years later, water ensures our future. Okay? People come to the Riverwalk. The Riverwalk is there because the San Antonio River is there. The San Antonio River is there because there were springs north of downtown. Here's the rock. We're talking about water and rock. If you go up to the hill country, you might see a scene like this, a rocky cliff. This is the limestone exposed in the cliffs of the Balcones Escarpment. That is where you find water and rock. Okay. This little diagram here, the green line is kind of the edge of that cliff that I showed in a photograph. The Spanish word balcones means balconies, and an escarpment is a cliff, usually a very long one. As you can see, this one goes all the way from San Antonio to Austin up to Temple, and it would go also almost to Del Rio. So there's a profound, we'll see this, there's a profound change in the geology, and that profound change resulted in a unique combination of natural resources which resulted in the presence of 5 major springs. Everybody needs water. Native, Spanish, German settler, whatever. So this became a very populated area, literally dictating where I-35 passes. Of course, before I-35, it was a state highway. Before it was a state highway, it was a country road. Before it was a country road, it was, based on some of the research Gary and I have done, it was an Indian trail leading from one spring to the other. If you're not familiar with a geologic maps are color-coded. The green is limestone, and it's limestone of a certain age. The limestone up in the hill country, 65 million years old. And then these little black lines are faults. And so the land literally drops, and the material that's eroded from the Edwards Plateau ends up distributed down towards the coast. And that's the warmer colors. So the warmer colors, if you think about the Highway 90 area, the areas that were traditionally agriculture. That's why. You don't plant cotton and corn in rock. You plant it in soil, and the soil is developed south of San Antonio. So you have this great coming together of natural resources. The springs coming out of the cliffs over here and distributing water to areas that have fertile soil. Oops. Here's a cross-sectional view. So again, the green is the limestone, and then there's an intermediate area where the land is very rugged, and then finally you always hear people talk about the Edwards Aquifer Recharge Zone, and here's the Balcones Escarpment Mark. This is where water, rainwater, surface water can percolate into the rock and form an aquifer. The aquifer gets full enough, water comes out through cracks in the rock, and we call them springs. So, this is kind of a nice diagram. The Edwards Aquifer Authority, and by the way, I'll put up here hard copies. I have copies of the resources that I use to prepare these slides. You're welcome to take them. I'm also going to provide them to the ladies so that they can post them on their website if you prefer it electronically. So here again, we're looking at a geologic map, and what I want to show with this is, again, the blue stars are San Antonio Springs and San Pedro Springs. So this Balcones Escarpment, this is not, I know what you're thinking. When I say hill country, you're thinking Fredericksburg or something like that. You're thinking Johnson City. No, it's in San Antonio. It's at San Pedro Park. The hill country starts where San Antonio College is on San Pedro. Okay? And so here's San Pedro Springs. Here's Blue Hole. And you can see this little line coming down. That's the San Antonio River. They don't show the San Pedro Creek. But notice that although the sources of water are way up here, down here is where the missions end up established. The furthest north being the Alamo, about where that O is probably. The missions are made of rock. Here's a photo I took of the limestone quarry in the foreground and Mission Concepcion in the back. And I spoke of water and rock, but water and rock do not build missions. Water and rock don't create on their own. They do in a way, they create a landscape, but missions. The native and the Spanish, the humans that came here because of the water and rock. Whether they came here 10,000 years ago, and we call them the natives, or they came here, 200 or 300 years ago, and they're the immigrants. But they're the most important components because they take these resources and make something of them. Water plus rock plus humans equal missions. And there's a map of the what we call mission trail, but the mission. So you see Valero, the importance of the river, and again, if Blue Hole, if San Antonio Spring wasn't there, there'd be no San Antonio River. No San Antonio River, no missions. The newcomers were attracted to this area. There was water for survival, rock for construction of comfortable and defensible buildings, and natives to convert to Christianity. So that are the factors which create the missions. Oops. Still haven't figured. Wait. Was that right? Okay, yeah, that was right. Okay, again, Concepcion, and I just kind of make the comment. The missions, are they sacred space, somebody's ancestral home, or just old buildings in San Antonio? You know what? It depends who you talk to, doesn't it? It depends how knowledgeable a person is. For instance, I literally had this occur at work. A coworker mentioned his daughter was going to be on spring break next week. I suggested he take her to see the missions, and he asked what days do they play. Okay? For some people in San Antonio, you say that word, and this is what comes to mind. By definition, a mission can be many things. Most broadly, a task or job, an important duty. Where we start getting closer to what we're talking about here when we say mission, stop and think about it. In some cities, you say, I'm going to the mission. They think you're going to a homeless shelter to get free food. Okay? So then we come to people sent to a foreign country to provide training or assistance. That gets a little closer. But now we have to work in the religious part. These people were coming to spread Christianity. And the Spanish came a long way on their mission. You know, what is this dinky little country over here thinking it's going to do with this great big landmass over here? You know, it's throwing a pebble into the Atlantic Ocean sort of thing. But they did it, and when they did it, unfortunately, the written record is very lopsided. Okay, as I say, native Spanish first encounters were recorded by the Spanish and subsequent Europeans, because we're biased towards the written word, towards books and journals and things like that. It's, in my mind, so unfortunate that we just have no inkling of what was going on in the natives' mind as they saw the ships, as they saw these foreigners coming to their shores. So basically, the documentary history starts in 1524 with the Spanish explorer Cabeza de Vaca. Why was Cabeza de Vaca in Texas? He was shipwrecked. And you know what? He was on the hook. He was the treasurer of the expedition. And it was unfortunate that he survived the shipwreck, because when he got back to Spain, the royal persons were not real happy with him losing those ships and horses and money and everything and coming back with no goal. And they said, you better come up with a good explanation. And so his testimony to the court is what survives as the accounts of Cabeza de Vaca, in which he talks about the natives he met and the places he went and how they got shipwrecked and everything like that. And so essentially he was on trial. And we are so fortunate to have this early document, because this poor guy was on the hot seat. So, as I'm pointing out, the Spanish and other Europeans dominate what is published about the native people of the New World. And so I felt we should understand something of Spain's role in European history. The Spanish were tribes at one time. This is a linguistic map. The Iberian Peninsula is inhabited by Celts, Iberians, and other pre-Roman people. Keyword, pre-Roman. Why? Because the Romans came in 218 BC and conquered the Iberian Peninsula and kind of started creating an idea of citizenship for these people. They called it Hispania, which is why we call ourselves Hispanic. Rome eventually falls, as we all know. Between 100 and 500 AD, the barbarians invade what was once the Roman Empire. One takeaway for me on this is that we started off with that tribal map, and it was like a little patchwork quilt. So the Spanish, quote unquote, were diverse people. They become more diverse now, because, you know, these are Visigoths and Vandals, and they're coming through what is modern day France, into Spain, even down into North Africa. And along the way, you know, personal contacts develop, babies are produced. And so in some ways, the Spanish and most of Europe is really kind of a mestizo culture. Spain was ruled by the Muslims for about 700 years. The Umayyad Caliphate conquered most of the Iberian Peninsula. And, you know, I encourage everybody that it's almost like every topic I throw out here, there's room for, you know, I'm throwing it out as a seed for you to do some sort of research on it. So if you make a note, you know, wow, Islamic Spain, I'm going to look that up. You know, I've read extensively about it. It's an incredible story. And, you know, and in many cases pertinent to our modern world. So basically Islam spread east and west, and finally in 1479 we have a country called Spain. Okay, no Spain up until this time. The unification of the Spanish kingdoms, because all those little tribal areas, they kind of merged, but they merged into independent kingdoms, and sometimes they warred among themselves. And part of what kind of created, a coherency was the fact that they were Christian, they got invaded by Muslims, and then it's kind of like, well, we need to stick together, and we need to help push these Muslims out. That period is called the Reconquista. But this date is the marriage of King Ferdinand to Queen Isabella, and here we see in their wedding portrait. And they were two major kingdoms. They come together. The other kingdoms say, "Oh, okay, let's set up a cooperation pact here, and we'll create a country." I didn't realize this. I had not connected these dots until I did this presentation. 1492, an eventful year for the Spanish and the natives of the Americas. In 1 year, all this happens. In January, the surrender of Granada. Now the Iberian Peninsula is completely Christian. April, Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand basically put out a call for explorers. They're offering a grant, okay, to put it in modern terms. And you submit your proposal, and they decide whether they're going to fund your idea. Well, we all know Columbus wins. He wins their confidence. They say, yes, we'll sponsor your journey. August, so April and August, Columbus sails from Castile. In October, he makes landfall in the Americas. And then here's the last piece of the puzzle. While Columbus is sailing, a new pope is selected. Rodrigo Borgia proclaimed Pope Alexander VI. There's his official portrait. If you were pope in this time period, essentially you influenced all of what we think of as Western Europe. There is, 1493, there are no Lutherans. There has been no fracturing of the Western Catholic Church. It's Christian, Catholic is all kind of one and the same. And what he does in 1493, a year after Columbus is finding the New World, he makes the kings of Spain agents for the church in New Spain, charged with sending missionaries. Boom. This guy, the only thing that would be comparable today would be is if, the leaders of the world got a message from the far side of the moon, hey, there are people on the moon and we live underground and you're welcome to come visit us. Oh, the world doubled for this man. I can't imagine how he took it. All of a sudden, there was nothing out there. Some guys went sailing off into Neverland. We didn't know we were going to see them again. And then they come back and say, hey, there's people, there's land, there's forests, there's rivers. What are we going to do? So we order you in virtue of holy obedience that you dispatch to the designated mainlands and islands virtuous and God-fearing men, etc., to instruct the natives, the missionaries. The path to that mission over there begins. And it results in exploration, which involves Spanish native contacts. Understood in this is these people are absorbing new cultures and accommodating foreign religion and religious and political ideas. But it is a two-way street. The Spanish, yes, they may come with their books and their missionaries and their soldiers and their ships. Yes, they're technologically advanced, so to speak. But now they're here, not in Spain. This isn't Spain. they have to learn new survival techniques. In central Mexico, we have the Cortez-Montezuma meeting in 1591, which eventually resulted in conflict, which interfered with the efforts of the missionaries. Okay, so the missionaries are caught between a rock and a hard place. You know, they don't want to conquer, they want to convert. But the Spanish, especially the military, you know, don't have a problem with massacring a village or attacking a tribe. And that's what's depicted here on the side. However, in December of 1531, this man depicted here, Juan Diego, who was indigenous, some accounts say he was Chichimec, saw an apparition of the Virgin of Guadalupe, the Virgen of Guadalupe, which is, you know, an icon that's seen throughout San Antonio and especially South Texas. What is significant about this and relates to the missions is, remember, Cortez, 1519. This isn't that much later, 1531. He is made a missionary by her. The apparition tells him, you will go and tell the Bishop of Mexico City. So this grubby little Indian here is supposed to confront a representative of the Pope, a representative of the Spanish Empire, and demand that he build a chapel on the site where she appeared. And how does he do that? You know, well, in the end, she creates a miracle. So she gives him flowers to take to the bishop, because the bishop said, sorry, don't believe you. You're just an Indian. You're making all this stuff up. Prove it to me. So when he takes his cape, fills it with the flowers, and when he dumps the cape of flowers out in front of the bishop, this image is on the cape. So the outreach, the fact that he was empowered to confront the bishop, got out. And in the decade that followed, approximately 9 million natives converted to Christianity. The Spanish Empire was worldwide, global colonial colony, and maybe a lot of you don't know, till 1976. Okay, in 1976 they gave up their last African colony. But the red lines are the sailing routes of the Spanish, and the green lines are the sailing routes of the Portuguese. We hear a lot about the English Empire and how, you know, the sun never set on the English Empire. Well, there was a time when it was the same for what you might call the Iberian kingdoms. The Spanish arrived prepared to carry out both a spiritual and military mission. Where does missionary service begin? It literally begins in the New Testament. In this passage from the 28th chapter of Matthew, in which Jesus Christ himself gives the Great Commission, is what this thing is entitled. Go ye therefore and teach all nations. And so, when Pope Alexander VI said, Spain, you're in charge of converting all these people, this is what they were hearing. This is what, you know, they were like, this is from the highest authority, authority even beyond man. And the missionary friars believed their primary duty was to follow the Great Commission of Christ. This is a picture I scanned out of one of my books. It shows Friar Antonio Yinas de Jesus Maria. He's in Veracruz, 1683, and he's come to establish an apostolic college. One of the big things, and we'll look at it in detail, is Spain recognized they needed to have people training in the New World. And they were in Zacatecas and Querétaro. One author summed it up very nicely here. This relationship, couldn't do it one without the other. No colonial empire in modern times was built on such an extensive philosophical or theological foundation. To support the colossal creative effort, the Spaniards allowed their main partners in colonization to be the Franciscan missionary friars. And they established these colleges so that they could immediately put boots on the ground, so to speak. Here's Querétaro. Here's a typical way station, San Juan Bautista on the Rio Grande, and San Antonio. So between 1531 and 1770, the Spanish soldiers, settlers, and missionaries gradually advanced northward. Their expeditions are called entradas. And when they started crossing the Rio Grande and coming up to San Antonio, reaching this area, they encountered the natives of this area. So, more than the soldiers, the Spanish counted on the missionaries to be the first line of colonization. You know, we all recognize, even in the 21st century, when countries talk and have a conflict, they would rather talk and negotiate than mobilize tanks and aircraft and soldiers. That's expensive. The Spanish were the same way. Hey, if you can get these guys to behave because they're working from the same doctrine that we are, then good. And King Philip II's royal orders for discoveries in 1573, that it gave the missionaries a central role in the exploration and pacification of new lands. But the counter to that was that autonomous groups of Indians were not to be enslaved. Okay? They were not free for the picking, because that had been happening before. They had been enslaved. They would be put essentially on plantations, haciendas, and people were trying to make money off them. So this is what I was saying earlier. To survive in a foreign environment required the Spanish to interact with the natives to learn the skills of the hunter-gatherers. If you're in a land that is essentially the environment of hunter-gatherers, you've got to learn to live like them. You cannot go, you can't be expecting to go to the store or something like that. It's the mercado isn't there. And over time, the exchange of ideas would alter both cultures. Eventually, they encountered the natives of this region, meaning South Texas, Bexar County. That's what I'm talking about here, so I'm bringing it closer to home. Spanish called the natives Indians. I read in several different resources that it was like, talk about confused people. They landed here and, we're in India, so these people must be Indians. Let's take them back and show them to the king and stuff. And it's like, what a misnomer. It's like they never corrected. We eventually call it the Americas, but the name stuck. My preference, I just refer to natives as in my presentation. So who were they? They were the inhabitants of this portion of the earth, their homeland, which they knew intimately. What was their mission? Survival by efficient utilization of the resources of their homeland. As I said before, the newcomers had to learn these survival techniques. What to eat, where to find water, what do you call that animal, sort of thing. And survival provides a third resource, humans, along with the naturally occurring water and rock. The natives knew where to find water. So 1700s over here, evidence of a pre-Columbian site, Barton Springs, early 1700s. San Marcos Springs, Governor Domingo Terán encounters them in 1691. So again, now we come back to the Balcones Escarpment, right? Here's I-35. There's these communities that we know so well, and they're there because of the springs, and these springs have been known, into prehistory. The natives also knew how to reutilize geologic resources. Caverns for shelter. Here's limestone with a dark chert nodule. Chert is flint. Okay, that's a close-up. That nodule is about 3 inches from one end to the other. So the Balcones Escarpment was not only provided the water, but it also provided shelter and tools. There was a significant book written by Bartolomé de las Casas, 1552, and it's literally entitled "In Defense of the Indians," and this led up to that later edict in 1573, but it is a book this thick, okay, and this guy is a lawyer, so you can imagine how it reads. But he was also a member of the Dominican order. And he says, the Indian race is not barbaric, nor are they dull-witted or stupid. He's saying, you all are underestimating these people. They've been endowed with excellent conduct, and they had political states that were well-founded on beneficial laws. Now, much of De la Casa's experience was with central Mexico. He didn't come up north of the Rio Grande, but he's saying, these are people that desire the same things as we do, order, to be fed, to live happy lives. And they had their own spirituality. All native groups in the state, meaning in this author's intent, he's talking about the state of Texas, had a firm and deep belief in a spiritual realm, a world so intertwined with the physical realm that the two merged into one. Another quote from Henri Joulet, who was with LaSalle in 1685, says, they didn't have formal religion, but when asked, they acknowledged something great above, pointing to the sky. And so, what the missionaries were bringing was not something totally foreign to these people. I don't know how well you can see this map, but anyway, this is from also from another really good book called Native People of Texas, and it shows Payaya, Sana, the different tribes, and this guy points out how abundantly populated these areas were because they were so full of natural resources. And here it identifies the boundaries. A key boundary again, the Balcones Escarpment. At that time, it was controlled by the Apaches, and the Indians south of it wouldn't go over there, and then to the south you eventually encounter the Karankawas. Same time period. Now we're looking at the area west of the San Antonio River and the Rio Grande, and again the Balcones Escarpment is a key feature. What I found particularly interesting is, unlike the San Antonio and Colorado rivers, the Rio Grande did not serve as a native cultural boundary. So this was even identified by the Spaniards as a porous boundary. People migrated back and forth. And sometimes it's confusing because the accounts will say, and the Indians came from Coahuila. Well, this is Coahuila, okay? So it's like, what part of Coahuila? Sometimes they'll mention a town, but the point being is that, again, well populated, plenty of resources, and these numerous bands had their own languages. However, the Spanish explorers encountered the fact that they used hand signs, and these hand signs are depicted in that book, Native People of Texas. So we have two accounts, 1685, 1691, in particular Friar Massanet was impressed by how well they could communicate. If they couldn't communicate verbally, they communicated with their hands. There are some authors that even attribute this to American Sign Language, okay, that it was the springboard for signing. There were multilingual Indians. Again, Fray Massanet encountered a tribal leader, who he called Captain Tomas. He was conversant in several Aztec dialects and in Spanish. I mean, look, 1691, how long have the Spanish been? Barely, not even 100 years. They've been around. Yet these native people are showing real facility with languages. And why not? They were already talking different languages to one another. So if you're to talk to your neighbor over there and your neighbor over there, you got to speak their language. And then in 1693, the governor encountered an encampment of Saquita, who provided him with a guide who was fluent in Spanish. So one of the things that I see in these accounts, these early encounters, is that this is a 50-50 thing. I come into your village, or I encounter you at the river, and you try to talk to me and I try to talk to you. There's limited conflict, and it's because you need each other to survive in this land. So near the San Marcos River, Duran's party encountered 2,000 Humano, Cibola, and other Indians. What I found interesting in this passage, so these are all quotes from these books, is that the tribe showed Turan formal patents issued by the governors of Chihuahua and New Mexico. They had their papers, and they understood how important those papers were to these newcomers. This was effectively passports. And Turan described the Indian leaders as brave and haughty, is what it says there at the bottom. I'm sorry about some of the slideshow dropping off. That's just how it came out. I don't know what happened. And then here near San Antonio, of course, 1693, they encountered the Payaya Indians. Massanet had already encountered them in 1691. And then again, you know, in the kind of that cooperative spirit, Fray Espinosa and Olivares, who were the ones who encountered Blue Hole and San Pedro Springs, engaged a mounted pampopa, as a guide. So the natives are like helping these people. You know, they're like almost kind of like the way you would help a lost tourist in downtown San Antonio. Near San Antonio, Espinosa found more than 500 natives and the lower line. After this expedition, there were no more expeditions until 1721, which was the Aguayo expedition. And I'm fortunate enough to have found at an estate sale a copy of his expedition diary. So this is a copy, and the stamp down here says that it's from the Archive of Madrid. So in March 1721, they went from the Rio Grande, entered San Antonio in April, and again looked for an Indian guide. This Captain Juan Rodriguez from the Rancheria Grande, and he led them basically on the same path as Espinosa's party had gone. This, in my mind, was a real find in this book. The mission system as of 1683. This was incredibly enlightening to me, and hopefully for you all, because we say mission, and even if we know about San Jose and we know about Concepcion, we don't think about how did they get there? Were they airlifted in? Did they just drop out of the sky, or what? No, it took this hierarchy, this bureaucracy, to create them. And what you see of course, at the top of the heap is the King of Spain, who in this period would have been Charles II. And then it splits, viceroy and commissary. Well, this side is the royal government side, okay? This is the guys who serve the king. This side is the clerical side, the religious side, the guys who are both obliged to the king and to the pope. And what the term commissary, we think of it as a place to eat. And in a sense, that's what it means. It's the place where supplies are gotten, supplies of money. These guys go to the Spanish court and they petition for money to support the missions down here. Now, the flow kind of goes both ways, especially on this side. And so you have these commissaries, and then this little father for the provincial clergy. These are essentially the priests who serve the Spanish colonists. The father guardian of the apostolic colleges is the guy who services the native population through the missions. And what's great is you see it come together. So you have a viceroy, you have governors, procurators, and then they come together on this line. So here, the secular and the religious merge again and is fed through one of the three colleges, Querétaro, Zacatecas, or San Fernando. San Fernando fed to the California missions. I highlighted in brown Querétaro, missions such as San Antonio de Valero. Zacatecas, missions such as San Jose. At the bottom of the heap, that's that thing over there. And all these men work to support that institution over there and the care and teaching of the Indians. So we'll take a quick look at these. San Antonio de Valero and Mission San Jose. Have you seen this guy's picture at the Alamo? No coonskin cap, right? Well, it ought to be, or he ought to at least be at the gas stations. Marquis de Valero. That's where the name comes from. This is the man. And down here is his resume. It tells you, if you can read it in the old Spanish, what this guy did. Here's his family crest. So you know he's a poobah. And so these guys didn't have their administration for very long, 1716 to 1722, and in that time they're sitting up there and they're processing all this requests for stuff. So the founding of Mission Valero, 1716, Father Olivares starts with a cleric, with a friar, petitioned the new viceroy. He wanted new missions and to outline his dream for a new mission in the valley of the San Antonio River. Keyword, dream. That thing over there is a dream. The 5 missions, they're dreams. They're somebody's dreams that they were fortunate enough to work through the bureaucracy and get rocks on the ground. The viceroy gave his approval, not only to the mission, but to found a presidio and villa. San Antonio de Bejar exists because of this guy, and you've probably never seen his picture. You know where I found this? List of Spanish viceroys on Wikipedia. Father Antonio de Margil. He's from the Zacatecan College. He went to request a new mission. In this case, he went to the governor, San Miguel de Aguayo. Here's the process. The governor issues a decree in 1720 which authorized Juan Valdez, the alcalde or mayor of Bejar, to find a suitable site for a mission. And then, unfortunately, it's cut off there, but then in February, the mayor, with one of his assistants, goes out, says, Margil, come with us. Hey, is this okay for you? Yes, it is. Okay, you can have it. And so, and here is the Aguayo. So Governor, this guy, again, where's his picture? He entered Texas. The province only had 1 presidio and 2 missions. When he left, Texas had 4 presidios and 10 missions. And then the bottom there, 1722, he's tired. He retires. He says, no, that frontier life was too much for me. So he's leading expeditions to fight the French. Meanwhile, he's processing all these requests from pesky friars that they want missions. And, wow, where's his picture? Well, it's on Texas Handbook Online. And then here we have Juan de Acuña y Bejarano. And during his administration, Concepcion de Acuña, named after him, and Espada and San Juan are established. He's also the viceroy who bestowed title on our friends the Canary Islanders. And what I'll point out is, Gary and I have worked on the white shaman and we talked about iconography and everything like that. But the Spanish did it too. What does this baton mean? Why does he have that medal? They always have their hat under this arm. And over here, again, his crest, and there's a name there. Is that an ancestor? So, these images are incredible. And that is what they ruled over there. That was New Spain. Okay? From the Yucatan to probably almost into Oregon, I guess. Now, were there Spanish up here? No. Some of them went a little further, blah, blah, blah. But by and large, and see, here's what I was talking about. Here's Coahuila, and here's Texas. And San Antonio kind of sits on the cusp of those two. San Antonio was a border town between Coahuila and Texas. So, anyway...
Let's take a 5-minute break real quick.
Yeah, this is a good place. Yeah, this is a natural break here.
Yeah. Let's take a 5-minute break. You still have some pastries. We have coffee. If you haven't climbed in, please go see Margo. Also, we have a big fundraiser coming up, so we're taking volunteers and applications, and you can scan the QR code. We're also looking for handcrafted vendors, so you can either fill out an application or scan the QR code. We've also got membership applications if you want to become a friend of, or if you're a descendant, you can fill out the application. All of that is back there with Margo. Let's take a quick 5-minute break, come get some pastries, coffee, water, and we'll come right back in 5 minutes.